Yeah, it's hard. All right. Got it.
All right,
Okay.
recording. I'm here with Randall Nickerson. Thank you, man. Thank you for making the time, and mostly thank you for making that film. Holy shit! What a great movie! What an amazing.
Oh,
I mean, when you set out to tell that story, you know what it reminded me of, and maybe it's the South African connection, but it reminded me of Searching for Sugar Man. Do you know that documentary?
yes. Oh, yeah. Incredible doc. Yep.
Incredible.
Yep.
And
I
I
think a
mean,
lot of people haven't even seen
and it
that.
won an Oscar, but yeah,
Mhm.
anyone, go see Ariel Phenomenon first and then watch Searching for Sugarman. But it reminded me of that because,
Mm.
I think when you enter into a project like that, where you've come across this incredible story, just incredible story that very few people have heard of, and you feel like, I want to bring this to the world's attention, which is a natural inclination for a creative guy like you. But there's also this incredible burden of not wanting to fuck it up, right? Because
Yeah.
the material is so good that
Yeah.
if you made a bad movie about it, that would really suck.
Yeah. That's very true. I started in 2007 in September and was at the school in 2008. And it was kind of slowly built. Like I knew, I just with the John Mack material. And then, that was really fascinating to me because of who he was, how genuine these kids were. And then I, took on the process. Once I got to the school, I'm like, oh my God, this is a big story. There were three teachers there who all said, yeah, it happened. I started running around interviewing the children that were now adults. And then I found out the BBC was the reporter, producer, cameraman, was the first person to be at the school, first interviews. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So it kind of built, and the more archival data that I received, wow, like there were so many wow moments that happened during this
Yeah.
project. Like I can't even believe it, and then nobody wanted to, at that time they weren't really interested in this subject,
Mm.
and it wasn't until around 2013 that I could actually start getting people interested. I always knew it was like, dude, this is an incredible story. But it took a lot of convincing with my editor, with my first assistant producer. And then they came on, and that was great because I so needed the help. It was a hard row.
You mentioned Tim Leach, the BBC journalist, who, I love how things like that happen, right? Where you go into a project not even knowing this guy exists, and then he
Yeah.
appears and he becomes a pillar of the film and such a
Yeah.
great presence, because he was this guy who had seen it all. He'd been in war zones and seen people lined up and shot against the wall, and, just
He was shot.
oh, he was
He had a
shot.
bullet hole in him. Yeah.
Yeah.
He lost his friend. He lost so many friends and people that he worked with over the years, because that's what happens. And war photography, war videography is really dangerous.
Yeah.
Uh,
And, but his presence is so interesting because, he comes into it, this sort of jaded, seen it all dude.
mhm.
And then he sees this and he interviews these kids and he's like, holy fuck,
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like this. And just
Yeah.
to see that transition in him, and that's such a great sort of perspective for you as the filmmaker, I think, to take advantage of that the way you did was wonderful.
Yeah, he was I mean, like a lot of people, including myself, like scarred characters. Um, but so interesting, so the way they see the world, what they've seen, like you're saying, like, oh my God, like the same things that man saw in his lifetime, as well as many other people, is incredible. But yeah, he kind of added a comic humor narration, step back, like, okay, wait a second, and that was Tim. He's a good man. Unfortunately, he's not here.
Yeah.
I really wish you could have seen this film.
Yeah.
There's several people that are not here that I wish, my brother, my cousin Colin,
Your Uncle
are not
Byron.
here. My uncle Byron, who started my uncle Byron. So I just random stuff. So my great grandfather, he Cooley Dickinson, he left his estate to not to his family. He left it to the town of Northampton to build a hospital. And it is still there. It's called Cooley Dickinson Hospital. It's a lot bigger than it used to be. But he started that. And my uncle, I had just gotten back from Africa the first time. He was dying of cancer, unfortunately. And he had seen a few things in his lifetime and was very interested in what I was working on. And he left his estate to me. I could have gone out and bought a Ferrari or something stupid, but he knew it all went into he gave me the first money to really start doing the film
Right.
properly.
And
And
he knew what you were doing.
he did. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, he did. No, he wouldn't have done that otherwise. He wanted me to complete the project, and we discussed it before he died. Like, I mean, I felt like, wow, why he's like, yeah, I want you to finish this project. And I told him, like, all the money's going to this project, and that's what happened. So my mother and father, my family, my brother, and then other donors and people online and other people in the field. I mean, it's been an amazing process. I owe a lot of money, but I owe an awful lot of money, and people are hurting right now. So everybody's knocking on my door, which is it's just the way it is. I'll figure it out. Hopefully it's going to do well online, but I owe a lot of thanks to so many people, like
Yeah.
that help, people that let me stay at their house, or, in Africa or wherever I was, people have been great.
It's before I turned on the recording, you and I were talking about similarities between making a film and writing a book. And, my last book, it occurred to me having one person's name on the cover of a book is ridiculous because
Yeah.
no book is ever written by one person. I
Hmm.
mean, in the case of my books, I'm basing my stuff on the work of a lot of other people. I'm reading their research and putting their stuff together and, combining their ideas with others. And, my partner's working her ass off to pay the rent while I'm sitting around, fiddling with a book. Her name should be on it, and your editors. And I know it's the same way with films. And, I heard you mention your Uncle Byron, how he left you some money to sort of, at the time, you thought would cover the expense of the film, but of course it turned out to be something very
Yeah.
different. But you
Yeah.
said he'd seen some things, and to me that's kind of a connection with Tim Leach, who, we were framing Tim Leach as like this war hardened, jaded, kind of seen it all dude. But on the other hand, people who have seen so much, I feel like um, they're open in a way because they've seen unbelievable things before. They've
Mm,
seen things that challenge the dominant paradigm of what reality is. And so
yeah.
when something else comes to them, it's like, oh, well, this is possible. I've seen some other weird shit. Um, what do you think? Like, I don't know if you're comfortable talking about personal stuff. I know I listened to a bunch of interviews you had done preparing for this, and you mentioned that you've had some experiences that have opened you up to
Mm,
possibilities that may be
very
considered
true.
unconventional. It sounds like maybe your uncle had as well.
That's correct.
Are you interested? Can you talk about any of that, or do you want to keep that out of it?
Um, I kind of want to, I just want, well, the problem is like, I have no problem talking about it on a private level.
Yeah.
But I don't want to take away from Ariel at all.
Are you
Uh,
afraid that people will think that you have an agenda because of experiences you've had?
Well, that's true. Yeah, it's being considered an artist, right? You know what I mean? I'm an activist on one hand, but I also want to be um considered for what I did. Do you know what I mean? For what
Right.
not and you're right. You stand on the shoulders of giants and you get so much help from the kids, everybody was amazing that I worked with. Liesel and Salma and Emily and Emma. I mean, Luke, Robert. I mean, these are almost this weird, but it's like a little family. When you spend 15 years with people, you get to know everybody, it's I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely had some things that have motivated me in this direction for sure. I pay attention real close to my environment because it is not as advertised. Uh, that's
Yeah.
just true.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm gullible or, I grew up as a mechanic's son. So I was working on cars, electronics, the piano forever still. And, I've gotten way more in depth in what I do. But I'm kind of a nuts and bolts kind of guy. So when I do see something that's way out of the ordinary, it catches my attention and then I study it because it shouldn't be there.
Right.
So
Right.
I mean, my story, yeah, I don't know. At some point, I would love to do it, Chris. Just not the time, but I appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe in the director's cut that you've been teasing a little bit. I heard you mention that might be
Yeah.
coming out in 6 months or so.
Well, I got to get the money to edit. You know, when I started this film, I figured, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I can do it alone. Don't need anybody's help.
Is this your first documentary?
This is my first long form,
Right. You're
hour
a
and
wildlife photographer, is that right?
I do wildlife. I was working on a film before Ariel came onto my plate from the John Mack Institute, which I have to send some appreciation to for sure. Um, and I was doing a documentary on Bud Hopkins,
Who's
his
he?
life story. Do you know him?
No.
Bud Hopkins wrote Missing Time, Intruders. He was an artist in Manhattan who also studied this subject,
Uh,
and he made some huge breakthroughs as far as people seeing these objects, right? And then why is their time all of a sudden is manipulated and they're missing? And
mm,
he kind of questioned, well, what's that about? Why do people not, why do people see these things and then all of a sudden they can't remember anything?
yeah.
So anyway, that got me onto Ariel. So yeah, I was doing shorter form, 16, 20-minute docs, got a bunch of them. So yeah, this is my first full length. Full length is very different. I'm sure it's like writing a short story as opposed to a novel. It's
Yeah.
oh my God, so hard.
You got to
It
break
takes
it.
so long.
Got to break it down into pieces, I think.
Yeah. Wow. And I
So,
gotta say, Chris Seward, my story editor, man, like that's what he does for work. So, I was okay at it, but he's a pro. And knew how to break it down, you know, into manageable pieces and finally build this incredible piece of art.
I
But you're
keep,
right. It takes a lot of people. Look at my credits are
yeah.
huge. There's probably 1,000 people in my credits, you know.
Yeah.
I
I
gave
mean,
everybody a credit.
I keep sort of flipping back and forth between appreciation for what you've created, just the film standing on its own terms, but also sort of amazement at the process of creating it, because it's really a story of incredible courage. Right now, we can start with John Mack risking his career and reputation to investigate something that is legitimately of incredible scientific importance.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who is willing to, take off their filters and look at things as cleanly as possible has to say, like, "Oh, this is an amazing thing. Of course we should all be looking at this. Of course every news organization in the world should be here." And then the courage of these kids to say, "Hey, this is what I saw." And 20 years later to say, "Yeah, that's what I saw." And the kids, the adults now who agreed to be interviewed, agreed to go on camera. I remember one of them said, like, "I don't think I've even told my husband about this."
Yeah.
Like, it's a part of their lives that they've compartmentalized and, sort of put away somewhere because it would be too disruptive to their families, religious beliefs and all sorts of things. And they had the courage, and you had the charm, or I don't know what you did to convince them to feel safe enough to talk about this with you on camera. Just, I mean, really incredible process, and then all the people who supported you and they took a risk with financial stuff, and your uncle, and there's just so much beyond a normal documentary, right? If you were just doing a documentary about nuclear fusion or something, it's a very different kind of endeavor.
Very true. Yeah, I should have picked a local story, not Africa. Holy crap.
Well,
But
Africa
yeah,
and your subjects are all over the world, right? You're
yeah,
filming in Canada and the US and Africa. And you,
UK.
you did, I think I heard you say you had like 60 interviews. Was that right? Or was it
Oh
60
God, I did.
kids?
Well, it was, this is kind of the thing that you find out a lot of things that don't end up in the story, but they originally reported 60 kids, 62, you know, what that refers to were 62 kids that did drawings. So there were two classes in the school that and I think smartly so, they were the younger kids, and they didn't even include those kids in any of this conversation because they were so traumatized. And so,
Mm.
the actual number, I believe, because I spoke to some of those younger kids that were in grade 1, grade 2, and there's a lot of them, and they never did any. They were totally separated from the whole thing. So the numbers, like one of the teachers said, is well over 100.
Okay.
So
And were there any adults that saw things? I,
yeah.
yeah.
So one of the first things I did was I was trying to eliminate the what was this thing? You know what I mean? Like there were a lot of adult witnesses, hundreds and hundreds of adult witnesses on the 14th of September, which was 2 days before Ariel. And then there were dozens on the Thursday, the day before Ariel, that evening around 7:30. So I went and interviewed all those. That's like 100 interviews, and it's there's only one in the movie, but they're all very riveting. And you got to say, what did they see? And I was looking at Space Warren and NASA and talking to, the strategic, getting information from Strategic Air Command. That's what it was termed at the time, to see what was in space, what was coming down through satellites, what might have been seen. So there was a whole elimination process from the external world scenario, what was going on at the time. Um, so, and then I started interviewing pilots, and then I found some testimony by a radar controller. So because I don't, no matter what people say, if you get a commercial pilot up there, or a radar operator, those people know what they're doing, and they know what they're seeing. I mean, your
Right.
lives, you put your lives in their hands. So back to the teachers, but so their testimony was really important to me to solidify, like, yeah, okay, externally I've got evidence, which is not in the film either, which is why I wanted to do the director's cut, which will be more the evidentiary side. I wanted to do the human story. So,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, this is what it's like for these people, and this is what it costs them. And so the teachers, yes. I've had three of the teachers tell me privately that they had seen these things too. Because when the kids came running in, two teachers went outside to see what was going on, right, immediately. Um, and the other teacher, something happened like a week later at the same location. She
Oh,
was living
really?
in, yes.
Oh,
So I mean, the one guy who was said this wasn't going on, right? Said didn't believe this was happening. I went and interviewed, and he had changed his mind. He said, well, initially he thought they were making it up, but over time he believed in them because of the consistency over
mm,
time. But I mean, when you go into a story, I've had my email, my phone number available for 15 years. I've not had one person, one of these kids or any of the witnesses say it didn't happen. Or,
I was
you
going
know
to
what I mean?
ask you if anyone went the other way who
No.
said, no,
I mean,
yeah.
if they have, they haven't spoken to me about it. In fact, what I found was people didn't want to talk to me. You know what I mean? I mean, actually met with several people who wouldn't go on camera, but I was like, well, why don't you want to talk about it? And it was because I don't want to think about it. And I don't want people to know that this happened to me because I don't want to complicate my life. Because
Right.
that's the thing. It's a fear of, you bring this stuff up, there's no upside, you know, there's no upside,
Yeah.
people look at you like, I don't know, maybe something's wrong with that guy. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, especially in a place where Christianity is so
Yes,
strong and, you get into a bit of a Galileo situation there where,
true. I think
yeah.
that's what we're on the precipice of.
Yeah. Do you think
Really do.
it's easier now? I mean, there's
Oh
been
yeah.
all this acceptance in mainstream media in the last few years, at least in the US. Do you think
Yeah, I mean,
people
it's
are,
much more open and worldwide. The US
is
is
it?
actually the worst I've seen in the world. I've been
Mm,
around the world, and the US has been the most stigmatized. They've stigmatized it the most in anywhere I've been.
mm,
Um, yep. I mean, even England's better.
mm.
Sorry. But I guess we're changing that sort of. But I gotta call out the media. Like, this is a huge story. And why are we not seeing it? You know, it's a
Well,
huge story
what
worldwide,
what do
not
you
just
think?
the story, the whole
Yeah.
thing, you know?
I mean, there was this thing that happened at O'Hare Airport, maybe
Yeah,
10,
remember
15.
that.
You know that?
Punch
Um,
hole. Yep.
there are hundreds and hundreds of people in the airport who saw this hovering craft out
Yeah.
over the runway, and then it went vertically straight up through the clouds and left a hole in the clouds, and
Yeah.
hundreds of witnesses. It was on the front page of the newspaper, and then the next day it was gone. Nothing. It was like a bubble burst, and it was a huge story. And then it was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it was like like a thunderclap in a room full of that sound absorbing foam or something. There was just
Right.
no
Exactly.
reverberation. It didn't
None.
bounce.
That's
Nothing
good
happened.
analogy. Yeah. I mean,
Wh-
that's so dangerous. I can't tell you that, in an airspace, especially in
Yeah.
an airport like that,
Yeah.
the danger of that being there is a real big problem. That's I mean, that's a
So
huge safety issue.
what do you think? And this is something that I was thinking about watching the film. Why a rural school outside of Harare, in the middle of nowhere, a bunch of kids. Like, if the purpose was to send this message that a lot of these children felt that there was a message being conveyed to them about the dangers of technology and, the trajectory of civilization is going in a self-destructive place, why not land outside MIT or the Pentagon or Caltech, or you know what I mean? Like, why? That does not seem like a good place to send a message.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. It's a lot of technology to ask to children. Um, well, I think if you look at all the other reports of other people around the world, and there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, who've had contact with these things, it's not abnormal. And whether that is purposeful or not on this other creature's part, that's, I don't know what else to call them. That's up for, I don't know, but it's not uncommon that people that have contact with them get these images or about what we're doing to our own environment. That's for real. So Ariel was not unique in that.
Mm.
Uh, what was unique about Ariel was there were so many, and they happened to be children that had that experience in a pretty open way, daylight, which is very unusual also. So I don't know. I mean, I've talked to a few people who are in the military side, Pentagon side, who have said, right around Ariel, there's, these uranium mines. So I went back and looked, and I'll give those people the credit. I went back and looked for those mines, and I found them, two of them. One just south of the school, and the one about probably an hour and a half north. That's much larger, but there's a lot of uranium mining that goes on in South Africa, Zimbabwe. Yeah, a lot of interesting businesses over there. Diamonds are huge also. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I kind of gave up, like, I don't know what their purpose for doing this was. Have no idea. But
Assuming there is a
all we
purpose.
can look is the effect.
Right.
No,
Right.
I don't know what these things are about or what their intentions are. And that's why I think it's so important that we find out as soon as possible. That's what concerns me. Like, what's their end game with us? What's their end game?
I had a teacher in college who I think he was an astrophysicist, and the last day of the class, he presented his fears around was it the Viking or the Voyager? I forget the spacecraft
Yeah,
that they
leaving the
sent out.
solar system.
Yeah, yeah, and it had a plaque with like our location in the solar system.
Maybe not a good idea, but we did that with radio waves way long
Yeah,
ago.
we've announced
That
our
was
presence. Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that's a good idea necessarily. I think a lot of species would say, yeah, no, we shouldn't do that because we don't know what's out there at all.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I felt like when he presented that, I felt like, come on, dude. Like if they want, he had this whole thing they were going to come and enslave us, and and my feeling was like, we are our nobody's enslaved us except ourselves, right? Like if they're so advanced that they can get here, they're going to do whatever the fuck they want with us.
That's true.
So forget about fighting them. That's a Hollywood fantasy.
Right.
And also, if they've
Those movies are
survived,
ridiculous. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I have to think, by definition, an advanced society is going to be smarter and cooler than us. And so, they're going to save us from ourselves, if anything. I have a more benevolent bias toward extraterrestrials, I think.
Well, I feel that same way. Like if they likely we're not the only creatures they've run into if they can travel. And they've probably just theoretically speaking, have seen processes like this with other species where they're at the boundary of leaving their planet into
Right.
their solar system, right? These people, who knows? They may dominate galaxies, and travel between galaxies, and they've seen probably who knows how many planets they've been to. Um, and seemingly, like, what it seems like when I look at the whole field and all the research that I've done in the on all the incidents that I could look at. I mean, there definitely seems to be a measure of study, you know, study, subtle movements in toward us, but not overwhelming. I mean, it's actually really smart because I do wildlife, right? So when I'm out in the field photographing, I have to build trust with that animal,
Mm,
or that animal is going to take off.
right.
So you start off at a distance. I always wear the same clothes, same hat, so it knows who I am. And particularly with animals that are far away from humanity, they don't see humans very often. But it's a process of building trust. And I'm, trying not to be the technological giant, which I am in their eyes. They don't understand a lot of the things that I have, which are magical to them, in a sense, things I can do with light, fire, lenses, all these strange things that they don't normally see. But it takes a process of time, and sometimes a lot of time, months, to get an animal to trust you, a wild cat or a bobcat or whatever. It was in, Africa was a different deal, bigger stuff that could eat you very easily. But yeah, so I kind of see that perspective of how another species may be looking at us and being a little delicate. Like, we don't want to shock them because our society will likely fall apart if we do. So they keep an eye on our technology. They're trying to evolve us to understand, yeah, we're not the only ones here. That's kind of the way I see it. And of course, the military is running into them more often than anyone else because that's our technological edge. Militaries all over the world are watched
Yeah.
by these.
Yeah. Do you think you talked about like how many planets they'd been to and so on. So do you see them as extraterrestrials or
Oh yeah.
so you don't see them as possible time travelers from
No.
our future?
I think from they can manipulate time. Uh, seems like they seem to be able to manipulate gravity, which once you can do that, you can manipulate time. I have no idea, like, really how this is all possible. But yeah, they're a 3D real thing. They're not
Hmm.
I don't think if they are, I'm open to the idea they're time travelers, but I think, when we talk about, oh, they're from another dimension or they're time travelers, it's like, yeah, no, let's not even go there. The fact is they're here, physical form, and what are we going to do about that? We'll figure out the other stuff later. But the fact that they've been visiting our planet for an awfully long time, um, should be concerning to us. Not that they're evil or anything like that, but it should be a concern where we apply science to it and apply universities to it to figure out what's going on. All we need more answers, and
Hmm.
it's not paying attention to, in my opinion. It is the biggest story. It, in my opinion, I can't even believe it's the times we're in. Actually, it's a very
Yeah.
similar to the Galileo, Copernicus moments. Well, it happened over years.
Yeah.
Um, Catholic Church didn't apologize to Galileo until 1992.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, I'm thinking of this story. You've probably heard the story, and I don't know if it's true, and I don't know how it could even be proven one way or the other. But the story is that the Mexican native, the people in Mexico, when Cortez and the ships first came up,
Yeah,
that the native people couldn't see the ships because they had never
right.
seen anything like that. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I wonder to what extent you said there were some adults who did see this, but I wonder if part of the appeal of the story is that because kids are so open-minded that they're seeing something new every day that they'd never
right.
seen before, that they're quicker to recognize something like this that's totally out of the ordinary.
That's true. And I found it in the native cultures over there, the indigenous, the um, the Khoisan
Mm,
Bushmen,
yeah.
some Olis. I mean, they when and other chiefs, other villages from the Shona, when they want to find something out, like they send their kids
Mm,
because the kids can see more. This is like, I mean, you can interview people over in Africa or other indigenous cultures, and they'll probably tell you the same thing.
right.
Uh, and that is because they don't have, you know, I just remember being a kid too, like, you know, I was just curious and like, you know, anything's possible, you know, and
Right.
I'm going to look at it, you know. Um, and that just fascinated me, like that different villages or indigenous cultures use that all the time. Yeah.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think you're right about that.
I remember reading a thing about Native American during the sort of colonial period when they were fighting with the whites. They would go up in a tree because they said white people never look up when they walk through the forest. They never look up, and they
That's
said,
so funny.
but
That's
don't do
great.
that if there are kids with them because the kids look up.
Interesting.
So watch out for the kids. They'll get you in trouble. What do you think the practical implications of this are? Um, you know, for you personally, I guess there are a whole bunch of practical implications, but like for humanity in general, for what about for other species? For what are the implications for wild animals, right? Are there is there any sort of aware, like when something like this appears, how do wild animals respond to it? I mean, not that,
They get real quiet.
do they?
Oh yeah.
So they
They
sense
get
it.
real quiet. Oh, totally. Yeah. I'm sorry. I actually know that from personal experience, but I'm not the only one. Um, yeah, they get really quiet. And then after these things leave, they get really loud. Um, that's interesting to me.
Mm,
Wildlife, you know, it's my my thinking about our planet is we think, you know, the aliens are only about us, right? Or another species from another world is just looking at us. Oh, I don't think so. Like, I think that you know, there's millions of species on this planet, and
yeah,
I doubt that they think we're, you know, the most important, or, you know what I mean?
yeah.
I would imagine wildlife has seen these things. You know, they probably studied our wildlife. I would imagine so. Um,
Yeah, they
I don't
probably see us as some sort of an infection on the planet, right? I mean, I would imagine they'd want to understand octopus intelligence and dolphin intelligence and chimpanzee and I mean, there's so many different types of intelligence if that's what they're
yeah.
interested in. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's egotism to think they're here to check us out in particular.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think the reason probably, oh, what's that thing? Sorry. It's just a little electronic stuff going on. So yeah, I think I don't know. Really don't know, you know, what their their scope is. But I would imagine what triggered a much more intense look at humanity was nuclear,
Mm,
uh, and the fact that we're at the edge of our cage, so to speak,
right.
and out into the universe. And we may be going out into somebody else's neighborhood.
You know about the Fermi
Been around a long time.
paradox? You heard of
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're at the edge of that too. We're
Yeah.
at so maybe that explains the timing as well. There's an urgency, like, hey, send the message to these guys before they really, blow it all up. Have you heard of Dr. Ian Stevenson? He taught at he taught at the University of Virginia Medical School. John Mack's story reminds me of him a lot because he just died a few years ago. He's a very respected psychiatrist, taught at the medical school, conventional school, obviously, but he was very interested in reincarnation.
Mhm.
And he sort of running parallel with his work at the medical school, he did research on reincarnation, and he found hundreds of cases of reincarnation where kids would talk about their previous life in great detail. And then he and his researchers would find the village that the kid had talked about because it had a river going next to the brick factory and so on and so on. And they would find the family of the person who had died, and they would
Mhm.
confirm that, yeah, this kid, and the kid would like, they'd bring the kid, and the kid's like, hey, Julia, how have you been? Is your knee still hurting you? And it,
Yeah.
like, this crazy stuff. It's just similar in that sense of like someone who had the courage to risk his reputation and his career to do this research. I think that's such a wonderful thing. You know, it's really unusual and interesting. Do you think,
Yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
do you think there's anything like, I was struck by one, I don't know if it was one of the kids or several of them who said that the figure sort of moves side to side. Um, and I was thinking that's Africa, and maybe the figure's dancing. There's some sort of awareness of local customs.
No, I don't.
No.
I don't think so. No, it moved strangely. It glided. Um, no, side to side. I don't remember anybody saying that to me.
Oh, okay.
Fortunately, everything's in my brain still. It's on the computer, but it's also in my head. I can't wait to let it go.
Do you think you'll
But
do
it's
that?
hard,
When are you going
huh?
to do it? When you're moving on to the next project, or at
I
what
think
point do you let
so.
it go?
I think when, I really would love the people that were part of this story to speak rather than me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I tried to. I just got too much on my plate. But if there are any of those people that want to speak about it, please call me. I'll make it happen. It's just I was trying to organize all that, and I got too much on my plate. So, but I really would like the people themselves to speak, if they're willing. I think that's the step I'm kind of waiting for. So I just don't want their story to go away.
Right.
Uh, it's too important. There are many others like it. Broadhaven, the incident in Australia, Westall, and there's many others where it's happened at primary schools. Um, so yeah, someone is going to have to cover that. I don't think I'm going to do that. Is all the other schools in South America, Russia, the United States, where similar incidents like this have happened, which is astounding alone. I mean, I
Yeah.
have the newspaper clippings for at least 7 or 8 different incidents that have happened.
And how many have not been reported? Right. And for every one that's reported, there
Right.
must be dozens that aren't reported.
There's a friend of mine who they were at a football game at a high school when they saw this thing come over and hover and sit there, and they all watched it. It never got reported. A
Right.
lot of people saw it, and maybe after the fact
Hmm.
that might be a reality. But yeah, these things, people don't want to report it because of the stigma that has been there for so long. But hopefully, and thank God, that is changing.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the greatest values of your film, that when people see it, I think it will have a destigmatizing effect. And you know, anything that we can do to reduce the amount of unnecessary shame and suffering in the world, I think is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So thank
Keeping
you.
things quiet and in the closet are not helpful.
No.
Like truth is, I mean, the further you get away from the truth, or the further you hide the truth, the worse things get.
Yeah.
We should just deal with what we have to deal with because we got enough on our plate as a species right now. We need to just be real honest and open about it because we need to solve them, and we have to cooperate with each other to do so, you know?
Yeah. I
No matter
really,
what.
I appreciate the fact that you spent 15 years researching this and you made this fantastic film, but still you're very willing to say, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I,
that's
I'm not, I'm a
admirable.
monkey. I'm a monkey, man. In comparison to what people are running into. I mean, that's just the truth. I may be smart for my own species, maybe, right? But in
Yeah.
comparison to something that's been around the universe for a while, I'm basically a wild animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
We're
that's a tough
all,
one. We have to, there's a humility that comes that a lot of people have gone through when they've encountered these things, these creatures from that have been around forever, and God only knows what their evolutionary process is and all the other things that happen. But I mean, technologically, you are completely in the dark. I
yeah.
mean, everything we have, including our best stuff, are antiques
Yeah.
compared to that stuff. I mean, that's the truth,
Yeah.
whether you believe it or not. But that's the thing we kind of all have to like eventually. I mean, it's happening to individuals all the time where you just get humbled and you realize, like, oh boy, I'm not that smart and I'm not that evolved.
Yep.
And that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with
There's,
that. I want
I,
to learn. I
I
want to
just,
learn.
I try to enjoy the primitive aspects of my life as much as possible. That's how I deal
Mhm.
with it. I'm, I'm just
I like that.
fine.
Me too. What? Yeah,
Build
I'm
a
good with being a
campfire, you
wild
know.
animal.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing, there's a lot of pleasure in that humility.
I agree.
So, listen, thank you for your time, man. I know
Thank
you're
you
doing
so
a
much,
lot of
Chris.
interviews and you're
I
answering the
just,
same questions over and over. I
you
appreciate
know,
it.
I appreciate your questions and how it was a nice conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I wish we could do it in person. I hate this technology
Me
mitigated
too.
shit. Yeah,
Me too. We got to get in person with each other all over the place.
exactly.
We're just getting removed from each other. I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you.
Sure.
I hope everyone sees the film and I hope Joe Rogan has you on his show and you make lots of money and move on to the next film.
Yeah, I really want to do that, sir. Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Chris. Have a good one.
You too.
Happy